Tonight, imagine standing alone in a sprawling, open courtyard, the air biting at your exposed skin with a damp, unrelenting chill. It is not during the day, when the sun might glitter off the gold leaf and blind you to the grime, but in the gray, slate-colored twilight of a November evening. The wind here doesn't just blow. It cuts, carrying a heavy, wet burden from the surrounding woods. You are standing before the most famous palace in the world, yet the sensation is not one of awe, but of a strange, hollow dread. The scale of the stone facade looming above you feels less like a monument and more like a cliff face, indifferent to your presence. The silence is deceptive. It is the silence of a held breath, a massive stone lung waiting to exhale something foul. You adjust your collar, but the dampness has already seeped through the wool. You are here because you have to be drawn to the light like a moth to a very slow, very expensive fire. You probably wouldn't last long here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and comment your location and your local time. Let's mark this quiet vigil together, across the dark. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward, the gravel crunching loudly under your boots. It is the only sound you make, and it feels uncomfortably loud, a violation of the heavy atmosphere. You are entering the Place d'Armes, the vast fan-shaped plaza that funnels the world toward the king's bedroom. The perspective is forced, designed to make you feel small long before you reach the front door. It works. You feel insignificant, a temporary speck of dirt on a very precise map. To your left and right, the great stables curve out like pincers, massive stone arms ready to embrace you or crush you. It is difficult to tell which. The air here tastes different. You might expect the scent of roses or expensive perfume, given the reputation of the Sun King. But the wind shifts, and you catch the true scent of Versailles. It is the smell of a swamp. Before the gold and the marble, this place was a marshland, a wet, sickly patch of earth that God had seemingly forgotten. Louis XIV decided to build here specifically because it was impossible. It was an act of dominance, forcing the liquid earth to hold stone. But the earth remembers. The dampness rises from the ground, smelling of wet rot, stagnant water, and the pungent, unmistakable odor of raw sewage settling in the culverts. It is a smell that will never leave you, no matter how much lace you wear. It is the smell of nature slowly digesting the palace from underneath. You reach the golden gates. They are towering, intricate, and imposing, separating the common world from the royal sanctuary. As you pass through, you hear the heavy clank of the latch. It sounds final. You are not just entering a residence. You are entering a machine. The palace is a mechanism designed for one purpose, to revolve around the body of one man. Everyone else you included is merely a gear, grinding against other gears, wearing each other down in the service of the central motion. The royal courtyard is tighter, the walls closing in. The brick is red, the stone white, the slate roofs dark blue. It is visually striking, a perfect tricolor, but in the dim light, it looks like a bruise. You notice the windows, hundreds of them, dark, reflective eyes staring down at you. Behind those panes, thousands of people are living, breathing, and struggling. You can feel their collective heat, a humid pressure building up behind the glass. The palace was built to house the entire nobility of France, to keep them under the king's thumb where he could watch them. It is a golden cage, and you have just walked into it voluntarily. You pause to look at your shoes. They are already coated in a thin film of mud. This is the first lesson of the court. The filth is democratic. It touches everyone. The paving stones are slick with a mixture of rain and the refuse of thousands of horses that pass through these gates daily. There is no escaping it. You can wear the finest silk stockings in Europe, but you will still be walking through the same muck as the stable boys. It is a quiet, humiliating equalizer. Historians still argue whether Louis moved the court here too, protect himself from the mobs of Paris, or simply because he enjoyed the misery of his courtiers. Looking at the sheer, brutal isolation of the place, you begin to suspect the latter. There is a cruelty in the architecture. It is too big, too open to the elements, too far from the comforts of the city. To live here is to be in exile, but in exile you must fight to maintain. You continue toward the marble court, the heart of the complex. The ground changes from rough cobbles to black and white marble tiles. They are slippery. You have to walk carefully, adopting the sliding, mincing gait of the courtier just to stay upright. This is by design. You cannot stride purposefully here. You must glide, deferential and cautious. One slip, one fall, and you are a laughingstock, or worse, ignored. And being ignored here is a death sentence. The grandeur is suffocating. Everywhere you look, there is ornament. Statues, busts, columns, friezes. It is a visual assault. There is no empty space, nowhere for your eye to rest. It mirrors the life you are about to lead, a life with no pauses, no silence, no privacy. The gold leaf on the balcony railing above you catches the last of the fading light. It glows with a sickly yellow sheen. You wonder how much that railing cost. Enough to feed a village for a year? Probably more. It is beautiful, yes, but it is a heavy beauty. It weighs on you. You realize, standing there in the deepening gloom, that the gates behind you had effectively vanished. Not physically, but psychologically. You cannot turn around. To leave Versailles is to admit defeat, to be cast out of the solar system. You are trapped. The realization settles in your stomach like a cold stone. You are now part of the inventory. You belong to the house. The wind picks up again, whistling through the archways with a low, mournful tone. It carries the sound of distant voices' shouts from the kitchens, the rattle of a carriage, the bark of a dog. But mostly it sounds like a low, continuous hum. The sound of 6,000 people trying to be quiet, trying to be noticed, trying to survive. You pull your coat tighter. It offers little protection against the damp that seems to radiate from the very walls. You have arrived. The golden trap has closed. You are inside the most magnificent palace on earth, and your first thought is that you would give anything for a dry pair of socks and a breath of air that doesn't. Tea tastes like a wet dog, but there is no going back. You take a step toward the lit doorway, the entrance to the labyrinth. The mud clings to your heels, dragging you down, reminding you that no matter how high you climb in this court, you are still just standing in a swamp. You step through the doorway, and the cold, damp air of the courtyard is instantly replaced by a wall of heat. It is not the dry, crackling warmth of a well-tended hearth, but a humid, heavy blanket that tastes of stale wool and human lungs. You have entered the hive. The sheer thermal shock makes your skin prickle, a sudden rush of blood trying to adjust to the temperature of 6,000 bodies trapped within stone walls. You might expect a palace to be spacious, to offer the luxury of distance. That is the illusion of the paintings. In reality, you are immediately forced into a physical intimacy with strangers that would be considered assault in any other context. The corridors are not thoroughfares. They are holding pens. You find yourself wedged between a low-ranking cleric and a minor countess, the velvet of her sleeve catching on the rough wool of your coat. You cannot pull away. There is nowhere to go. You are suspended in a sea of fabric and flesh, drifting only when the current of the crowd decides to move. The concept of personal space has been abolished by royal decree. Here, proximity is power, and everyone is fighting to be closer to the center, meaning everyone is fighting to be closer to you. You can feel the breath of the man behind you on your neck, hot and rhythmic, a constant reminder that you are never, ever alone. Historians still argue whether the extreme overcrowding was a calculated political strategy to strip the nobility of their dignity, or simply a result of poor urban planning. Standing here, with an elbow digging into your ribs, you suspect it doesn't matter. The result is the same. You are a sardine in a very expensive tin. The noise is the second thing that hits you. It is a dull, roaring drone, the collective sound of thousands of whispers, rustling skirts, and shuffling shoes. It never stops. It echoes off the marble floors and the painted ceilings, creating a chaotic acoustic loop that makes it difficult to think. You try to focus on your destination, perhaps the king's antechamber, or a specific salon, but navigation is a contact sport. To cross a room is to negotiate a treaty with 20 different people, all of whom believe they have more right to the floorboards than you do. You notice the sweat first. It's winter outside, but in here, it is the height of a tropical summer. The ventilation is non-existent. Windows are kept shut to prevent the drafts that the king detests, turning the galleries into incubators. You watch a bead of perspiration roll down the powdered temple of a duke. It tracks through the white dust, leaving a muddy streak before vanishing into his collar. You realize with a start that you are sweating too. Your heavy layers of linen, waistcoat, and outer coat designed for style, not thermodynamics, are trapping every ounce of heat your body produces. You are slowly basting in your own juices, and so is everyone else. This creates a unique atmosphere, a haze of biological humidity. You are breathing in the exhaled air of the entire French court. It feels recycled, thick, and lacking in oxygen. If you are prone to fainting, you should probably leave now, though falling down would be difficult. The crowd is packed so tight you would likely just hang there, upheld by the pressure of bodies around you. It is a comforting thought, in a morbid sort of way. You can't fall if there's no floor visible to hit. The architecture itself seems to conspire against you. The rooms are arranged in an enfilade, meaning they open directly into one another without corridors. To get anywhere, you must walk through rooms where people are eating, gambling, or trying to sleep. There is no distinction between public and private. You squeeze past a group of courtiers playing cards, your hip brushing against the table, rattling the coins. They don't even look up. You are just another obstacle, another piece of furniture that breathes. You learn quickly to guard your pockets. In this crush, the distinction between a nobleman and a thief is often just a matter of hand speed. You keep one hand on your purse and the other held protectively across your chest, a posture that mimics a devout prayer but is actually just paranoia. It is a strange paradox. You are surrounded by the wealthiest people in Europe, yet you have never felt more at risk of being robbed. As you drift deeper into the crush, you become acutely aware of the fabrics rubbing against you. Silk, satin, brocade, velvet. They are beautiful to look at, but abrasive when pressed against you for hours. The friction generates a static charge in the dry, smoky air. Every now and then you touch a door handle or another person and feel a sharp snap of electricity. It's as if the tension in the room is manifesting physically, small sparks of resentment jumping from person to person. There is a bleak irony in the fact that to be seen, you must disappear into this mass. You are here to make your fortune, to catch the king's eye, but you are more likely to catch a cold or a flea. You find yourself staring at the back of the head in front of you, studying the complex architecture of a wig that has seen better days. You wonder how long it has been since that hair was cleaned. Then you wonder how long it has been since you were clean. In this press, cleanliness is a moot point. You are contaminated by contact. The sheer volume of humanity also creates a logistical nightmare for basic movement. A simple journey of 100 yards can take 20 minutes. You shuffle forward, step by step, apologizing to people who don't care. "Pardon," you murmur, stepping on a toe. "Excusez-moi," you whisper, elbowing a bishop. It is a slow, grinding dance. You realize that endurance here is not about strength. It is about the ability to stand still for hours while being slowly compressed. And the worst part? You know that upstairs, in the attic spaces and the mezzanines, it is even worse. Servants and lesser nobles are packed into rooms so small they can't fully stand up, sleeping 3 or 4 to a bed, or simply on the floor. At least down here, surrounded by the crushing elite, you have the illusion of grandeur. Up there, it is just a tenement with a better address. You finally break through a particularly dense knot of people near the Hall of Mirrors, gasping for a pocket of slightly less used air. But there is no relief. The crowd stretches on endlessly, a river of wigs and waistcoats flowing toward the king. You realize that this is your life now. You take a deep breath, hoping to steady your nerves after the crush of the crowd, but you immediately realize your mistake. There is no fresh air here. What you are inhaling is not oxygen. It is a physical substance, a heavy, invisible broth that has been simmering in these hallways for decades. You choke back a cough, tasting the air as much as smelling it. It coats the back of your throat with a greasy, cloying film that no amount of swallowing can clear. The stench is not a single note. It is a complex symphonic arrangement of odors that hits you in waves. The first layer is the most obvious, the biological output of thousands of people who believe that water is dangerous. It is the sour, fermented tongue of unwashed skin, amplified by the woolen layers trapping the heat. It is the smell of scalp grease, of cheesy feet enclosed in leather for weeks, of breath sour with wine and rotting teeth. But this is just the base note, the canvas upon which the other smells are painted. Overlaid on this is the smell of the palace itself. The stone, despite the gold leaf, is perpetually damp. The marshland beneath the foundations seeps up through the marble, contributing a persistent earthy note of mold and wet dog. The tapestries that line the walls, depicting heroic battles and gods, act as massive sponges. They have absorbed years of smoke, sweat, and spills, releasing a stale, dusty musk whenever someone brushes past them. If you were to squeeze a section of the velvet curtains, you suspect it would drip a gray, foul-smelling liquid. Then comes the food. The kitchens of Versailles are a factory of consumption, churning out endless meals for the court. But because the kitchens are located far from the dining areas, to prevent the risk of fire and noise, the smell of food is everywhere and nowhere. It is the scent of roasting meat game birds, venison, beef, that has grown cold and heavy. It's a fatty, lingering odor like a kitchen the morning after a banquet, but magnified 1,000 times. The smell of rich, butter-heavy sauces congealing on silver platters mixes with the sharp, acidic bite of vinegar and wine. It's not appetizing, it's suffocating. Breathing here is less of a biological necessity and more of a dietary choice. You notice the candles flickering in the sconces. There are thousands of them, casting that romantic, dancing light you've heard so much about. But up close, the romance dies quickly. While the king's chambers might burn beeswax, the hallways and lesser rooms often rely on tallow-rendered animal fat. As they burn, they release a thick, greasy soot and the distinct smell of burning meat. It smells like a barbecue gone wrong. This greasy smoke settles on everything: your clothes, your skin, the inside of your lungs. After an hour, you feel like you have been smoked like a ham. The air is stagnant. Historians still argue whether the architects simply forgot about ventilation, or if the fear of drafts, which were believed to carry disease, was so potent that airflow was intentionally murdered. The result is a microclimate where smells do not dissipate. They accumulate. The air you are breathing right now might well contain molecules of a dinner served 3 days ago, suspended in the humidity. It is a museum of odors, perfectly preserved in the stillness. You try to move toward a window, hoping for a draft, but the heavy drapes are drawn tight. The atmosphere is so thick you feel you could almost carve a slice of it and serve it on a plate. It creates a sense of lethargy. The lack of oxygen and the abundance of carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide from the fires make your head swim. You feel a dull throb behind your eyes, a headache that will become your constant companion at court. It is the Versailles fog, a mental and physical haze that keeps everyone slightly sedated, slightly nauseous. To combat this, the courtiers have turned to chemical warfare. You catch a sudden, blinding whiff of musk and ambergris as a duchess sweeps past. It is not a delicate scent. It is a heavy, aggressive perfume applied with a trowel, intended not to complement natural scents, but to obliterate them. It doesn't work. The perfume merely sits on top of the rot, creating a nauseating dissonance. It smells like a flower garden planted on top of a landfill. The clash between the floral oils and the underlying stench of sweat and sewage creates a new third smell that is somehow worse than either alone. It is the smell of desperate vanity. You touch your own face and realize your skin feels tacky. The air is so laden with particulate matter soot, powder from wigs, dust from the construction that never ends, that you are slowly being coated in grime just by standing still. You are becoming part of the ecosystem. The grime enters your pores. You can taste the metallic tan with the silver polish used by the servants, the sharp ammonia of the cleaning fluids that are used sparingly and ineffectively. It is a sensory assault that never relents. Even when the crowds thin out in the deepest part of the night, a smell remains. It has permeated the woodwork. It is in the very structure of the building. You realize with a sinking feeling that you will never smell nothing again. Silence has a smell here, and it is the smell of old, dead air. You find yourself longing for the sharp, clean bite of a winter frost, or even the honest stink of a horse stable, which at least smells like life. Here, the smell is of decay arrested by luxury. It is the smell of too many people, with too much money, rotting slowly together in a gilded box. You pull a scented handkerchief from your sleeve, clove-studded orange pomander you bought from a vendor at the gates, and press it to your nose. It helps for a second, a tiny island of citrus in a sea of funk, but soon your nose is overwhelmed again. The palace wins. It always wins. There is a strange intimacy to this shared atmosphere. You are inhaling the same air as the king, the same air as the scullery maid, the same air as the spaniels running underfoot. It is a biological communism that the rigid social hierarchy tries to ignore. You look at the man next to you, a high-ranking minister with a stern face. He is breathing shallowly, his nostrils flaring slightly. He knows. Everyone knows. But no one says a word. To complain about the smell would be to complain about the king's house, and that is treason. So you all stand there, inhaling the soup, pretending that this is the sweetest air in France. As you move deeper into the gallery, the air gets warmer, the smells richer, darker. You are walking into the belly of the beast, and the beast has terrible breath. You realize that your clothes will smell like this for weeks, that this scent will cling to you like a bad reputation. You have been branded by the atmosphere. You are now a carrier of the Versailles miasma. You lower your handkerchief, accepting your fate. If you can't breathe the air, you might as well learn to chew it. The pressure in your lower abdomen has moved from a dull suggestion to a sharp, insistent command. It is the one biological reality that even the Sun King cannot legislate away, though he certainly tries to choreograph it. You have been standing for hours, drinking wine to numb the ache in your feet and the assault on your nose. But now that wine demands an exit. You look around the crowded salon, scanning the walls for a door, a screen, a servant, anything that signals relief. But you realize with a creeping horror that in a palace built to house the glory of France, the architects forgot to build a bathroom for you. You are learning the most humiliating lesson of Versailles. Privacy is not a right. It is a commodity you cannot afford. In the modern world, the act of elimination is a solitary, shameful secret, hidden behind locked doors and porcelain. Here, it is a public performance, a communal activity integrated seamlessly into the social calendar. You watch as a high-ranking duchess, mid-conversation with a Spanish ambassador, signals to a servant. He brings forward a stool with a padded velvet seat. She sits, arranges her skirts like a brooding hen, and continues her discussion on trade tariffs while relieving herself into the copper pan hidden beneath the cushion. The ambassador does not blink. He merely steps back half an inch, a subtle, practiced adjustment of range. This is the chaise percée, the pierced chair, the ultimate symbol of status. To own one is a luxury. To be allowed to use one in the presence of the king is a career milestone. But you do not have a chaise percée. You are a minor player in this drama, which means you are left with the alternatives, none of which are dignified. You slip out of the salon into the hallway, hoping for a shadow. The corridors are dim, the candlelight struggling against the gloom, but they are not empty. They are never empty. Servants rush past with trays. Guards stand like statues. Other desperate souls prowl the perimeter. You spot a heavy velvet curtain near a window alcove. It looks promising. You approach it, but as you pull back the heavy fabric, the stench hits you like a physical blow. You are not the first person to have this idea. In fact, you are likely the 50th person today. The floorboards behind the curtain are stained dark, slick with the evidence of your predecessors. You hesitate. The indignity of squatting in a semi-public hallway, hidden only by a dusty drape, is profound. But the body does not care about dignity. You fumble with your layers, the breeches, the stockings, the long waistcoat. It is a logistical nightmare. Fashion here is designed for standing still, not for urgent biological mechanics. You are fighting your own clothes, a frantic, silent wrestling match in the dark, praying that the king does not choose this specific moment to walk down this specific hallway. It gives a whole new meaning to the term, court jester, though you are the only one not laughing. As you finish and hastily rearrange your dress, you step back out, hoping to blend seamlessly into the traffic. You avoid eye contact with a passing Swiss guard. He knows what you are doing. You know he knows. But in Versailles, if you don't acknowledge it, it didn't happen. Denial is the mortar that holds this palace together. You walk further, trying to escape the immediate scene of your crime, and nearly trip over a bucket. It sits innocuously by a doorway, brimming with a slurry of waste. These are the overflow valves of the palace. When the chaises are full, or when a servant can't make it to the cesspits outside, the buckets are simply left in the corridors. They sit there for hours, sometimes until morning, fermenting in the heat. You stare at the bucket, at the flies already gathering in a lazy cloud above it. It is a stark reminder that beneath the gold leaf and the wigs, this entire society is just one kicked bucket away from catastrophe. Historians still argue whether the lack of sanitation was a result of ignorance or arrogance. But looking at the intricate fountains in the garden's complex hydraulic systems, capable of shooting water 50 feet into the air, you know it wasn't a lack of engineering skill. They could move water for beauty, but not for hygiene. It was a choice. The king's comfort is absolute. Yours is irrelevant. The palace is a gilded cage, but it is also a gilded sewer. You navigate the grand staircase, watching your step. You have heard stories of the staircase cascade, where the accumulation of waste in the corners flows down the marble steps like a slow, foul lava. It is said that the servants sometimes sweep it away, but often they just push it to the side, creating narrow paths of safe passage. You walk in the center, eyes fixed on the ground. It is a dangerous game of hopscotch. One wrong step and you will be tracking the reality of the court onto the king's Savonnerie carpets. The situation is even worse for the women. You watch a marquise struggling with the vast scaffolding of her skirts, her face a mask of pinched concentration. She carries a berdelou, a boat-shaped ceramic pot specifically designed for the female anatomy, tucked into her sleeve or a specialized garter. She has to use it standing up under her layers, often while standing in a circle of people. The skill required is immense. It is a high-wire act of balance, timing, and bladder control. If she spills, she is ruined socially. If she succeeds, she hands the vessel to a maid who whisks it away, warm and full, like a forbidden chalice. There is a specific hallway, the Galerie des Antiques, which you learn to avoid entirely. It has become an unofficial latrine for the lower nobility and the servants. The ammonia stench there is so powerful, it makes your eyes water from 20 paces away. The stone itself seems to be dissolving under the acidic assault. You wonder how the king tolerates it. Then you remember, the king is surrounded by strong perfume, open windows in his private sanctuary, and an army of cleaners who focus only on his immediate path. He lives in a bubble. You live in the runoff. As the night wears on, the palace transforms into a minefield. The candlelight dims, casting long, deceptive shadows. A puddle of wine looks exactly like a puddle of urine. You learn to walk with a shuffling gait, testing the friction of the floor before committing your weight. It is exhausting. You are constantly scanning for filth, constantly managing your own biology, constantly pretending that you are floating above it all. You find yourself standing near a window, looking out at the gardens. The fresh air is just on the other side of the glass, but you cannot open it. The window is sealed to preserve the symmetry of the facade. You are trapped in the smell. You realize that in Versailles, the difference between a throne and a toilet is often just the quality of the upholstery. You check your shoes again. The leather is spotted. You feel a wave of nausea, not just from the smell, but from the realization of what human beings will endure for proximity to power. You have maneuvered your way into the Holy of Holies, the king's bedchamber. It is early morning, though the time is dictated less by the sun and more by the specific rattle of the royal throat clearing. You are squeezed against a tapestry depicting the triumph of Alexander the Great, trying to make yourself as two-dimensional as the woven figures. You are here for the lever, the rising ceremony. It is the most exclusive ticket in Europe, a daily theatrical production where the protagonist does nothing more heroic than get out of bed. The room is heavy with gold. It drips from the ceiling, encrusts the furniture, and is woven into the curtains. But beneath the gilding, the air is stale. It is the breath of a room that has been sealed tight all night with a man sleeping inside it. You watch the curtains of the massive four-poster bed twitch. A collective intake of breath sucks the remaining oxygen out of the room. The Sun King is awake. The ritual that follows is a masterclass in the performance art of the unwashed body. You might expect, for a man who claims to be chosen by God, a cleansing ritual involving tubs of steaming water and soaps from the Orient. You would be wrong. Water is the enemy here. It is viewed with deep, superstitious suspicion, a treacherous element that weakens the limbs and opens the pores to the miasma you were choking on in the hallway. Instead of a bath, the king gets a wipe. You watch as the first valet approaches with a silver basin. It does not contain water, but esprit de vin spirits of wine. He dips a sponge into the alcohol and hands it to the king. Louis dabs his face, then his hands. He rubs briskly, the alcohol evaporating quickly in the overheated room. That is it. The royal bath is complete. It is less a cleaning and more of a light marinating process. Historians still argue whether Louis XIV ever took a full bath in his life, or if he simply relied on the abrasive power of dry rubbing to keep the crust at bay. Standing here, watching him hand the sponge back, you suspect the latter. The logic of the court and the medical profession is that linen cleans the body. If you change your shirt 5 times a day, the theory goes, the linen absorbs the sweat and grease, acting as a removable skin. So, the king is not dirty. He is simply between shirts. The dressing begins, and it is here that the hierarchy of grime becomes clear. Every article of clothing is a political instrument. Who hands the king his socks is a matter of state security. You watch a duke tremble as he presents the right sleeve of the royal nightshirt. It is the greatest moment of the duke's life, which is a devastating commentary on the duke's life. As the heavy nightshirt is peeled away, you catch a glimpse of the royal skin. It is pale, pasty, and looks as if it hasn't seen the sun in years, which is ironic for the Sun King. But you also notice something else, the smell. As the bedclothes are thrown back, a warm, ripe odor wafts toward you. It is the smell of an old lion. It is sweat, stale perfume, and the distinct, musky scent of a body that is never truly washed, only polished. To combat this, the king is doused in scent. But he has become allergic to heavy perfumes in his old age. They give him migraines. So now, the strongest man in Europe can only tolerate the scent of orange blossoms. He is sprayed, dabbed, and dusted. The result is a confusing olfactory profile. Beneath the delicate, citrusy top notes lies the heavy, enduring bass note of unwashed man. It is a smell that commands respect, mostly because to recoil from it would be treason. The ceremony drags on. The king puts on his breeches. He puts on his shoes with the red heels. He puts on the diamond-encrusted cross of the Order of the Holy Spirit. Each layer is a barrier, a wall of silk and velvet built to hide the biological reality underneath. You realize that the grandeur of Versailles is essentially a very expensive distraction from the fact that everyone here is itching. You watch him adjust his wig. The king went bald young, a result of a fever, and now wears massive, towering constructs of human hair. You wonder where that hair came from. Some peasant girl in the provinces who sold her braid for a few coins. Or perhaps a corpse. It doesn't matter. It has been boiled, curled, and powdered until it looks like a sculpted cloud. But you know that under that wig, the king's scalp is sweating. You can see a bead of moisture trickling down behind his ear, vanishing into the lace collar. The powder from the wig drifts down like dandruff, settling on the shoulders of the valet. It is a dusty, messy business, being divine. The room is silent, save for the rustle of fabric. No one speaks unless spoken to. You are witnessing a man put on his pants, and you are expected to treat it like a sacrament. There is a palpable tension. Will he choose the blue coat or the brown? The fate of a weaver in Lyon might depend on this whim. He chooses the blue. A collective mental sigh ripples through the room. As the king stands fully dressed, he looks magnificent. The transformation is complete. The pale, smelly, shivering old man who woke up 5 minutes ago has vanished. In his place stands the state. The velvet absorbs the light. The diamonds refract it. He is a shimmering golden idol. But you, standing 5 feet away, know the truth. You saw the gray washcloth. You smelled the bedsheets. You know that inside that shell of brocade is a body that is just as sticky, just as biological, and just as human as yours. He turns to the room. His eyes sweep over the crowd, glassy and impenetrable. He does not see you. You are part of the furniture, a witness necessary to validate his existence. He nods, a microscopic dip of the chin. The lever is over. The machine of the day has started. As the crowd begins to shuffle backward, bowing and scraping, you feel a strange sense of disillusionment. You came to see a god, but you found a man who cleans himself with vodka and changes his shirt instead of showering. It is a powerful lesson in propaganda. Cleanliness is not about hygiene. It is about appearance. If you look clean, if you smell expensive, And if everyone is too terrified to tell you otherwise, then you are clean. You back out of the room, careful not to turn your tail to the king. The air in the antechamber feels slightly cooler, though no fresher. You take a breath, tasting the familiar soup of the palace air. You have survived the morning ritual, but as you walk away, you can't help but scratch your own arm. The power of suggestion is strong. Seeing the king's heavy wig has made your own scalp itch. You wonder if the lice distinguish between royal blood and You stand before a small, cracked mirror in your rented room in the attic of the palace, preparing to perform the most dangerous act of the day, cleaning yourself. There is no steam, no running water, and certainly no soap. Instead, you hold a coarse piece of linen cloth, stiff as a board and dry as the desert. You grip it with the grim determination of a soldier preparing for battle, because that is essentially what this is, a war against your own skin. In the world of Versailles, water is not a friend. It is a hostile agent. The medical wisdom of the age delivered by men in ominous black robes who hold urine samples up to the light. Like fine vintage is clear. Water kills. The theory is terrifyingly simple. Warm water opens the pores of the skin. Once those gates are unbarred, the body is defenseless against the invisible, poisonous miasma that saturates the air. If you bathe, you are essentially inviting the plague, the pox, and the vapors to march right into your internal organs. To soak in a tub is to court death. It is a form of suicide that leaves you wet and vulnerable. So you have learned the art of the dry bath. You take the rough linen and you rub. You scrub your arms, your chest, your neck until the skin turns pink and raw. The goal is not to wash away the dirt, but to mechanically abrade it, to scrape the filth off the surface like rust off a hull. It is a painful, scratching ritual. You can feel the dead skin flaking away, mixing with the powder and the sweat of the previous day. It is exfoliation by necessity, a dermabrasion that leaves you stinging, but theoretically clean. You change your linen shirt. This is the second half of the cleaning process. The belief is that the linen acts as a wick, drawing the impurities out of your body and trapping them in the fabric. If you are wealthy, you change your shirt 3 times a day. If you are poor, you wear the same shirt until it rots off your back or walks away on its own. You button the fresh shirt, feeling the stiff, cool fabric against your irritated skin. It feels like a bandage. You tell yourself this is hygiene. You tell yourself that the white cuffs poking out from your coat are proof of your purity. But deep down, you know you are just wrapping a dirty package in clean paper. There is a dark irony to this hydrophobia. You walk past the windows and see the gardens of Versailles, the greatest hydraulic achievement of the century. The machine de Marly pumps millions of gallons of water from the River Seine to feed the fountains. Water shoots into the sky, cascades down marble steps, and sprays from the mouths of bronze horses. The king has conquered water. He bends it to his will for aesthetics. But for his own body? A damp rag is considered a risk. The palace has enough water to drown a city, but you cannot find a cupful to wash your face. It is a wet paradise inhabited by dry, crusty people. Historians still argue whether this fear of water was purely medical, or if it was also a convenient excuse for a court that didn't have the plumbing to support 6,000 baths. Regardless of the cause, the effect is a population that is terrified of being wet. You have heard stories of courtiers who, upon being caught in a rainstorm, rushed to the physicians in a panic, convinced they had been poisoned by the clouds. They were bled, purged, and wrapped in heated blankets to close the pores before the rainwater could rot their livers. You laughed when you first heard it. You aren't laughing now. You are rubbing your elbow with a towel until it burns, just to be safe. The only time water is acceptable is when it is heavily modified. You might dab a little rose water behind your ears, or use a sponge soaked in vinegar to wipe your hands. The acid cuts the grease, and the sting reassures you that it's working. But plain water? That is for peasants and fish. This aversion creates a specific texture to the skin of the court. Without water to hydrate and cleanse, the skin becomes tough, calloused, and layered with the remnants of powders and pomades. You look at your own hands. The knuckles are gray, the creases defined by ingrained dirt that no amount of dry rubbing can dislodge. You are becoming fossilized. You are turning into a statue of yourself, covered in a patina of grime that is slowly hardening. You notice a small red spot on your wrist. A flea bite? A rash from the linen? Or the beginning of something worse? You quickly cover it with a patch of black silk gamouche. These beauty patches are the ultimate camouflage. They are fashionable, yes, but their primary function is to hide the evidence of a failing body. By the time you are dressed, you might be wearing 3 or 4 of them, a constellation of black stars mapping out your skin infections. You are literally patching yourself up to face the day. The dry bath is exhausted. You feel hot, scratchy, and strangely sticky, despite the rubbing. The friction has stimulated your sweat glands, so you are already damp again before you have even left the room. It is a losing battle. You realize that true cleanliness is a modern invention, a luxury of plumbing and germ theory that you cannot even conceive of. Here, clean just means not visibly muddy. You pick up your powder puff. If you can't wash the dirt away, you must bury it. You dust your face, your neck, and your hands with a fine white flour. It settles into the crevices, smoothing out the texture, absorbing the oil. It smells of iris root and stale starch. You look in the mirror again. The person staring back is pale, matte, and uniform. You look like a ghost or a very expensive pastry. The dirt is still there, lurking beneath the white surface, but it is hidden. And in Versailles, if it is hidden, it does not exist. You take one last look at the basin of water on the stand, the water you used only to rinse your mouth, and even then, you are careful not to swallow. It looks inviting, cool, clear, deadly. You turn your back on it. You are a courtier of the Sun King, and you will face the day dry, itchy, and smelling faintly of a bakery. You adjust your cuffs, ensuring the clean white linen is visible. It is the flag of your surrender, signaling to the world that you have done your duty, even if your skin is screaming for a bucket of soap. The seasons have turned, and the damp, bone-chilling cold of the winter marsh has been replaced by something far more insidious. Summer has arrived at Versailles, and the palace, built of stone and glass, has transformed into a convection oven of terrifying efficiency. You stand in the hall of mirrors, and for the first time, you understand the true malice of the architecture. The 17 massive arched windows, designed to flood the gallery with light, are now acting as a greenhouse wall. The sun beats against the glass, superheating the stagnant air inside until the atmosphere shimmers with a visible, oily haze. You are standing in a beam of sunlight that feels heavy enough to crush you, but you cannot move. You are waiting for the king to pass, and the king does not rush. You are trapped in the center of the world's most expensive solar cooker. If you were a peasant in the fields, you would be wearing a loose linen shirt, perhaps a straw hat. You would feel the breeze, but you are not a peasant. You are a courtier, and your suffering is dictated by the rigid laws of etiquette. You are encased in the habit à la Francaise, a suit of clothes that was clearly designed by someone who hated the human body. Let's take inventory of your prison. First, against your skin, is the linen shirt thick, long-sleeved, and tucked in tight. Over that, a waistcoat usually made of heavy silk or brocade, buttoned all the way to the chin. Over that, the justacorps, the main coat, with its wide cuffs and heavy pleats, lined with yet more fabric. Then the breeches, tight at the knee, strangling your circulation. And finally, the thick wool stockings rolled up over your calves. You are effectively wearing 3 layers of insulation in a room that is hovering around 90 degrees. It is a masterpiece of thermal mismanagement. You feel the sweat begin to bead on your forehead. It gathers under the rim of your wig, a wig made of human hair, horsehair and wool, which acts as a fur hat you are never allowed to take off. The sweat trickles down your temple, cutting a path through the white powder. You cannot wipe it away. To wipe your face in the presence of the king is a breach of protocol, so you let it roll. It drips into your eye, stinging with salt and lead powder. You blink rapidly, tearing up, looking for all the world like you, are weeping with joy at the sight of the monarch. In reality, you are just melting. The heat does something terrible to the layers of clothing. The sweat from your body soaks into the linen and wicks into the silk and the wool. But because the fabrics are so heavy, they do not dry. They simply become heavy, wet compresses strapped to your torso. You are fermenting. You can feel the moisture trapped against your skin, warm and slick. It is a perfect breeding ground for rashes. Your back is a landscape of prickly heat, a constellation of red, itchy bumps that sting every time the heavy coat shifts against your spine. You want to scratch. You would give your family estate for 5 seconds with a back scratcher. But you stand rigid, hands at your sides, smiling pleasantly while your skin screams. The air in the room is thick enough to chew. With thousands of bodies sweating in unison, the humidity spikes. The evaporation from the unwashed masses creates a localized jungle climate. The smell, which was bad in winter, is now aggressive. The heat activates the old stains on the tapestries, the residue in the floorboards, and the layers of dried sweat on your own coat. It is a sour, yeasty reek. It smells like a wet dog wrapped in a velvet curtain. Historians still argue whether the windows were kept shut during the summer, due to the prevailing medical theory that fresh air carried malaria, literally bad air, or simply because opening them would let in the flies. Standing here, watching a fat bluebottle fly land on the lip of a perspiring duchess, you suspect it is both. The windows remain sealed. The heat builds. You are breathing air that has been in this room since Tuesday. You look around at your fellow sufferers. The women have it worse. They are encased in whalebone stays rigid corsets that compress the ribs and lungs layered under pounds of satin petticoats, hoops, and panniers. You watch a young marquise sway slightly. Her face is pale beneath the rouge, her breathing shallow and rapid. She is hyperventilating, her lungs unable to expand against the stays in the crushing heat. Suddenly, she drops. She doesn't fall forward. Her dress is so wide, she simply sinks straight down like a collapsing souffle. A ripple of interest moves through the crowd, but no one rushes to help. To leave your spot is to lose your place in the line of sight. A servant eventually drags her into an alcove, fanning her with a dirty handkerchief. Fainting is common here. It is almost a hobby. In fact, swooning is considered a sign of delicate breeding, mostly because only the rich can afford to wear enough clothes to pass out from heat stroke. You feel a wave of dizziness yourself. The dehydration is setting in. You haven't had water since morning because drinking water is risky, and the wine is served at room temperature, and the room is an oven. Your mouth is dry, your tongue sticking to the roof of your mouth. You try to swallow and taste dust. You are being cured like a ham, smoked and dried in your own clothes. The weight of the fabrics becomes a physical burden. The gold and silver embroidery on your coat is real metal. It adds pounds to the garment. You are essentially wearing chainmail disguised as flowers. The shoulders of your coat dig into your flesh. You shift your weight from one swollen foot to the other. Your feet are swelling in the heat, straining against the leather of your shoes. You can feel your pulse throbbing in your toes. There is a cruelty to the aesthetics of Versailles in the summer. The mirrors multiply the crowd, making the room feel twice as full, twice as hot. The gold leaf reflects the sunlight, creating a glare that triggers migraines. Everything is designed to dazzle, but the dazzle is blinding and hot. You are trapped in a kaleidoscope that has been left out in the sun. You glance at the king as he finally passes. He is wearing a coat of heavy red velvet lined with ermine. Ermine. In July, he looks impassive, a statue of endurance. You realize that his power is not just in his armies or his laws, but in his ability to wear fur in a heat wave without sweating through his silk. It is a biological dominance. Or perhaps he is sweating just as much as you, and the layers are just thicker, hiding the evidence better. As the procession moves on, the tension in the room breaks, but the heat remains. You peel yourself away from the wall. Your coat sticks to your waistcoat. Your waistcoat sticks to your shirt. Your shirt sticks to you. You are a singular fused unit of sodden fabric. You walk stiffly, trying to minimize the friction of the wet linen against your raw skin. You long for the cool, damp drafts of winter that you complained about 6 months ago. You would trade your soul for a block of ice. But ice is a luxury reserved for the king's sorbets. You will have to settle for finding a dark corner and unbuttoning your waistcoat for a few scandalous seconds, letting the tepid air hit your chest. As you navigate the sweltering crowd to leave, you realize that hell is not a pit of fire. It is a crowded room in France in the middle of summer, where everyone is wearing velvet and pretending they aren't dying. You pull at your collar, gasping for a breath that isn't shared by 500 other people, and resign yourself to the fact that you will be damp until October. You are standing in a quiet corner of the antechamber, trying to maintain the stoic expression of a nobleman, but your entire existence has narrowed down to a single square inch of skin just behind your left ear. It starts as a phantom sensation, a light, feathery tickle, as if a stray hair has come loose. You try to ignore it. You focus on the tapestry on the wall, on the conversation about the Dutch wars, on anything else. But then the tickle stops, and the bite begins. It is a sharp, specific puncture, followed by a burning itch that radiates across your scalp like a spreading fire. You are the victim of the most fashionable parasite in Europe. You are wearing a peruke, wig. And unfortunately, you are not its only inhabitant. The wig is the crowning glory of the courtier. It is a towering architecture of curls, rising high above your forehead, cascading down your shoulders in heavy, unnatural waves. It signals your status, your wealth, and your loyalty to the king. But physically, it is a heavy, hot, suffocating helmet made of dead hair. And inside that dark, warm, fibrous jungle, a civilization is thriving. You reach up, ostensibly to adjust a curl, and slide along. Slender stick made of ivory or grattoir, under the heavy mesh cap of the wig. This is your most prized possession. It is a scratching stick, designed specifically to navigate the labyrinth of hair and reach the tortured skin underneath without disturbing the carefully arranged style. You find the spot. You dig in. The relief is orgasmic. For a split second, the torment ceases, replaced by the dull throb of scratched skin. But as you withdraw the stick, You know it is a temporary victory. You have merely agitated the residents. Historians still argue whether the fashion for wigs began solely to hide the king's thinning hair, or if it was a misguided attempt at hygiene. The logic was that, by shaving your head, you would deny lice a place to breed. It was a sound theory, in principle. You shaved your own hair, leaving your scalp pink and vulnerable. But then, you immediately covered it with a wig made of horsehair, goat hair, and human hair, purchased from peasants who likely never washed in their lives. You essentially traded a small, manageable population of lice on your own head for a massive, fortified city of them on top of it. The environment inside the wig is perfect for life. To keep the curls in place and to ensure the white powder sticks, the hair is greased with pomade. This pomade is made from rendered animal fat, usually pig or bear grease mixed with scents. Then, the wig is dusted with pounds of flour. You are walking around with a layer of lard and carbohydrates on your head. You are not just a host. You are a buffet. The lice, the fleas, and the mites do not just live in the wig. They feast on it. The heat from your head incubates the eggs. The grease feeds the larvae, and your blood provides the main course. You look at the man standing opposite you. He is a bishop, a man of God. On the shoulder of his black cassock, you see a small, pale speck moving. It navigates the fabric with purpose. It is a louse, descending from the holy summit of his wig to explore the lower altitudes. You watch it crawl. It is hypnotic. Does he know? Can he feel it? Of course he can. You see his jaw tighten, his eyes flicker. He is suffering the same silent torture as you, but he does not move. To scratch openly is vulgar. To admit you are infested is to admit you are human. So you both stand there, nodding politely, while thousands of tiny legs march across your scalps. The maintenance of the wig is a nightmare in itself. You cannot wash it. If you submerge this monstrosity in water, the hair would mat, the curls would collapse, and the structure would dissolve. So instead, the wigs are sent to the barber to be baked. They are placed in an oven in the hope that the heat will kill the vermin. It works to an extent. But the eggs, the nits, are resilient. They wait, and as soon as the wig cools down and is placed back on your warm, sweating head, they hatch. The cycle begins anew. The smell is something you never quite get used to. It is the scent of the wig itself, old hair, rancid fat, and stale flour warming up throughout the day. By the afternoon, you smell like a deep fryer that hasn't been cleaned in a month. The perfume you douse yourself in battles with this odor, creating the signature scent of the aristocracy, roses and rancid lard. At night, the relief of taking the wig off is tempered by the reality of your own scalp. You look in the mirror at your shaved head. It is red, inflamed, and dotted with bites. The friction of the heavy wig cap has rubbed the skin raw. You look like a sickly convict. You apply a cooling salve, perhaps some vinegar to soothe the itch, but the damage is done. Your scalp has become a war zone. You sleep in a nightcap to keep your head warm, but the memory of the weight remains. You can still feel the phantom pressure of the curls. There are rumors, whispered in the dark corners of the palace, of worse things than lice. Stories of nests found deep in the center of the largest wigs. Stories of spiders, or even mice, seeking refuge in the warm, cavernous structures of the high court coiffures. You tell yourself these are just stories. But then you feel a movement that seems too heavy, too substantial to be a mere louse. A shifting of weight. You freeze. You hold your breath. It stops. You tell yourself it was just the wig settling. You tell yourself that you are not carrying a rodent on your head. But you don't move your head too quickly for the rest of the day, just in case. The social contract of the wig is absolute. You cannot be seen without it. To be seen bald is to be seen naked. It is an exposed, vulnerable state. So you endure. You endure the heat, the weight, the smell, and the constant, maddening crawling. You realize that you have become a vehicle for the wig. You are the biological support system for an artificial organ that is slowly eating you alive. You watch the king. His wig is the largest of all, a towering black cascade. He stopped powdering it white as he aged to look younger. It must weigh 5 pounds. You wonder if the royal lice are larger, if they have their own hierarchy. Does the king itch? He must, but he never shows it. He is the Sun King. Perhaps his blood is too hot for them. Or perhaps he has simply mastered the art of dissociation, separating his mind from the sensations of his skin. As the evening wears on, the itch becomes a dull, rhythmic throb. It is a form of madness. You find yourself pressing your fingernails into the palms of your hands, transferring the urge to scratch to a different part of your body. It doesn't work. The itch is in your brain now. You are trapped in a cycle of irritation and repression. Finally, you step into a shadowy alcove, checking to ensure the coast is clear. You lift the back of your wig, just an inch of forbidden ventilation. The cool air hits your damp, bitten scalp. It is the most exquisite physical sensation you have ever felt. Better than wine, better than love. It is the simple, pure joy of evaporation. But then you hear footsteps. You slap the wig back down, sealing the oven door once more. You step out, smiling, nodding, bowing. You are a nobleman of France, and you are infested. You step out onto the terrace, escaping the suffocating heat of the Hall of Mirrors for the promise of the open air. Before you lies the masterpiece of André Lentre, a garden that is less about nature and more about geometry forced upon the earth. It is a breathtaking vista of symmetry lines of clipped yew, perfectly circular basins, and white gravel paths stretching to the horizon. In the paintings, this is paradise. In the etchings sent to foreign courts, it is the ultimate symbol of man's dominion over the wild. But as you descend the marble stairs, taking your first deep breath of the afternoon, you realize that dominion smells remarkably like a urinal. You have entered the largest, most expensive open-air latrine in the world. The problem, once again, is logistics. The gardens of Versailles cover nearly 2,000 acres. The walks are long, the conversations are endless, and the wine is plentiful. But there are no facilities. If you are halfway down the grand perspective, enjoying a stroll near the Latona fountain, and the urge strikes, you are a 20-minute walk from the palace, which, as you already know, has nothing to offer you but a bucket in a hallway. So the nobility does what it must. They improvise. You walk along the Allée Royale, the gravel crunching loudly under your heels. The air should be filled with the scent of the thousands of flowers planted in the parterres. And it is. You catch the sweet, heady perfume of hyacinths, jasmines, and the famous orange trees brought out in their silver tubs. But beneath it, cutting through the floral sweetness like a rusty knife, is the sharp, eye-watering sting of ammonia. It is the scent of 1,000 urgent bladders relieved against the beautiful green walls of the hedges. The clipped yews and boxwoods, designed to create outdoor rooms for conversation and intrigue, serve a double purpose. They are the only privacy you will find. As you pass a dense wall of greenery, you hear the unmistakable rustle of skirts and the splash of liquid hitting the earth. You look away, feigning interest in a statue of Apollo. A duke emerges from behind the bush, adjusting his breeches. He nods to you, you nod back. It is the silent camaraderie of the desperate. The sheer scale of the contamination is staggering. The soil in the most popular walkways is saturated. In the heat of the summer sun, the ground practically steams, releasing the accumulated vapors of the court. The fresh air you sought is a myth. You are walking through a miasma of nitrogen and decomposition. The gardeners fight a losing battle. They bring in fresh soil. They plant new flowers to mask the stench, but they cannot stop the tide. The court is a biological force that cannot be contained. You notice the hedges themselves are suffering. At the base of the perfectly manicured yews, the foliage is brown and withered. These represent ammonia. You step out onto the terrace, escaping the suffocating heat of the Hall of Mirrors for the promise of the open air. Before you lies the masterpiece of André Lentre, a garden that is less about nature and more about geometry forced upon the earth. It is a breathtaking vista of symmetry lines of clipped yew, perfectly circular basins, and white gravel paths stretching to the horizon. In the paintings, this is paradise. In the etchings sent to foreign courts, it is the ultimate symbol of man's dominion over the wild. But as you descend the marble stairs, taking your first deep breath of the afternoon, you realize that dominion smells remarkably like a urinal. You have entered the largest, most expensive open-air latrine in the world. The problem, once again, is logistics. The gardens of Versailles cover nearly 2,000 acres. The walks are long, the conversations are endless, and the wine is plentiful. But there are no facilities. If you are halfway down the grand perspective, enjoying a stroll near the Latona fountain, and the urge strikes, you are a 20-minute walk from the palace, which, as you already know, has nothing to offer you but a bucket in a hallway. So the nobility does what it must. They improvise. You walk along the Allée Royale, the gravel crunching loudly under your heels. The air should be filled with the scent of the thousands of flowers planted in the parterres. And it is. You catch the sweet, heady perfume of hyacinths, jasmines, and the famous orange trees brought out in their silver tubs. But beneath it, cutting through the floral sweetness like a rusty knife, is the sharp, eye-watering sting of ammonia. It is the scent of 1,000 urgent bladders relieved against the beautiful green walls of the hedges. The clipped yews and boxwoods, designed to create outdoor rooms for conversation and intrigue, serve a double purpose. They are the only privacy you will find. As you pass a dense wall of greenery, you hear the unmistakable rustle of skirts and the splash of liquid hitting the earth. You look away, feigning interest in a statue of Apollo. A duke emerges from behind the bush, adjusting his breeches. He nods to you, you nod back. It is the silent camaraderie of the desperate. The sheer scale of the contamination is staggering. The soil in the most popular walkways is saturated. In the heat of the summer sun, the ground practically steams, releasing the accumulated vapors of the court. The fresh air you sought is a myth. You are walking through a miasma of nitrogen and decomposition. The gardeners fight a losing battle. They bring in fresh soil. They plant new flowers to mask the stench, but they cannot stop the tide. The court is a biological force that cannot be contained. You notice the hedges themselves are suffering. At the base of the perfectly manicured yews, the foliage is brown and withered. These represent ammonia burns, the chemical scars of the aristocracy. The plants are literally being poisoned by the people who admire them. It is a slow, silent death for the greenery. The gardeners constantly replace the dying shrubs, swapping them out in the dead of night so that the king never sees the decay. To him, the garden is eternal and perfect. To you, it is a crime scene. The gravel paths are another form of torture. They are made of crushed stone, designed to look stark and white against the green. But in the dry summer heat, the traffic of thousands of feet grinds the stone into a fine, choking dust. It coats your throat. It settles on your velvet coat. It turns your expensive black shoes gray. But worse, when mixed with the moisture found in the hidden corners, it creates a paste of foul, gritty slurry that sticks to your soles. You are tracking the garden's secrets back into the palace with every step. You try to find a bench to rest your legs, but you hesitate. The stone benches are often used as makeshift changing tables, dining tables, or worse. You see a stain on the white marble of a bench near the colonnade. Is it wine? Is it mud? You decide not to risk your silk breeches to find out. You keep walking. Standing is safer. The beauty of the fountains offers a strange cognitive dissonance. You watch the water jetting high into the air, sparkling in the sun. It is clean, diverted from distant rivers. But as it lands in the basins, it mixes with the stagnant water that has been sitting there for weeks. The basins are often choked with algae and debris. And sometimes, late at night, when the guards are looking the other way, they serve as the only bathtub available. You look at the dark water of the mirror pool and wonder what lies beneath the surface. It is best not to look too closely. There is a section of the gardens known as the labyrinth, a complex maze of paths adorned with statues from Aesop's fables. It was designed as a place of education and amusement for the king's son. But for the courtiers, it is the premier spot for illicit liaisons and discreet relief. The labyrinth smells worse than the stables. It is a trap for odors, the high hedges preventing the wind from clearing the air. To enter the labyrinth is to brave the most concentrated stench in the park. You stay on the main paths. The irony of the orangery strikes you. It is a massive, cathedral-like structure designed to house the king's beloved orange trees during the winter. It is an architectural marvel. But the scent of the orange blossoms, meant to be the perfume of the court, is now inextricably linked in your mind with the smell that usually accompanies it. The courtiers use the heavy planters as screens. The sweet citrus smell does not hide the rot. It merely frames it. It is a sickly sweet combination that makes your stomach turn. You watch a group of ladies walking near the parterres. They hold their skirts high, not just for fashion, but to keep the hems out of the filth. They carry scented fans, fluttering them rapidly in front of their faces. It is a futile gesture. The air is the air. You cannot fan away the atmosphere. They stop to admire a flower, leaning in to sniff a rose. You wonder if they can smell the reality of the soil it is planted in. The rose is feeding on the waste of the court. It is a perfect, closed loop of luxury and filth. Historians still argue about the extent of the damage done to the gardens by the hygiene habits of the time, but the records of the gardeners complaining of the indignities suffered by the shrubs speak volumes. The king demands nature be tamed, clipped into shapes that do not exist in the wild. He demands order. But the biological chaos of his subjects undermines it at every turn. The straight lines of the paths are bordered by the crooked reality of human needs. As the sun begins to dip lower, the smell intensifies. The cooling air seems to trap the odors closer to the ground. You realize that there is no escape. The palace is a sewer. The garden is a latrine. The entire estate is a gilded cage where hygiene has been exiled. You look back at the palace, glowing gold in the sunset. It is magnificent. It is the envy of the world. And you are standing in a patch of wet gravel, breathing in the scent of urine and roses, wondering how long you can hold your breath. You turn back toward the heavy stone facade. At least inside, the smell is familiar. Out here, the contrast between the beauty of the flowers and the ugliness of the reality is too sharp, too disappointing. You head back to the hive, leaving the dying ewes to their fate. The heavy, cold meal has settled in your gut like a stone, and a familiar cramp begins to tighten your insides. In any other place, illness would be a private misery, a time to retreat to a warm bed and sip broth. But in Versailles, sickness is a public event, and the cure is often more terrifying than the disease. You pray the cramp passes, because if you complain, you summon the men in black. You see them gliding through the corridors like ravens the royal physicians. They are the high priests of a medical cult that believes pain is the only pathway to health. To fall into their hands is to enter a world of medieval torture disguised as science. Their toolkit is simple and brutal. If it's inside you, get it out. By any means necessary. The foundation of their philosophy is the humors. They believe your body is a bag of fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, that are constantly trying to kill you by getting out of balance. Their solution is subtraction. You watch as a physician attends to a duke who has merely complained of a headache. The remedy is immediate: bloodletting. The silver lancet flashes in the candlelight. A vein is opened. Dark, red blood flows into a measuring bowl. The duke pales, his eyes rolling back, but the doctor nods with satisfaction. He isn't curing the headache. He is draining the life force to cool the body. You wonder how making a man faint helps him run a country. But bloodletting is just the opening act. The true obsession of the court is the purge. You cannot spend a week here without hearing the wet, aggressive sound of the clister, the enema syringe. It is the obsession of the age. Louis XIV is the undisputed champion of this practice, rumored to have endured over 2,000 enemas in his lifetime. The physicians believe that the colon is the root of all evil, a toxic pipe that must be flushed daily. The instruments are monstrous. The syringe is a large metal piston, ominous and cold. The fluid injected is a witch's brew of water, vinegar, purgatives, and sometimes even tobacco smoke. You see servants rushing down hallways, carrying these loaded weapons, towels draped over their arms. It is a daily ritual. The king receives courtiers while recovering from a purge, sitting on his chaise de fer, discussing treaties while his body violently rejects the morning's treatment. It is the ultimate power move, maintaining eye contact and royal dignity while your insides are liquefying. But the true horror, the shadow that hangs over the court this year, is the great operation. The king has developed a fistula in a painful, festering abscess in the most private of places. It is the result of years of hard riding, constipation, and those brutal enemas. For months, the court has whispered about the king's discomfort. He cannot sit. He walks with a stiff, pained gait. The Sun King is being defeated by his own anatomy. The treatment for this condition is a surgical nightmare. There is no anesthesia, no ether, no opium strong enough to drown out what must be done. The royal surgeon, Charles Francois Felix, has been tasked with the impossible. Cut the king, fix the fistula, and do not kill the monarch. If he fails, he dies. If the king dies, France falls into chaos. The pressure is unimaginable. You have heard the rumors of Felix's preparations. To perfect the technique, he requested permission to practice, not on cadavers, but on the living. Prisoners and orphans from the hospitals of Paris were brought to him. You try not to think about them. You try not to imagine the screams echoing in the surgeon's private quarters as he refined his stroke, designing a special curved scalpel specifically for the royal behind. Many of those test subjects did not survive. They are the silent, bloody foundation upon which the king's health rests. The day of the operation arrives. The palace holds its breath. You are not in the room, only the highest officials and the mistresses are permitted that intimacy, but you can feel the tension radiating through the walls. The king lies on a table near the window for the light. He refuses to be bound. He holds the hand of his minister Louis and tells Felix to proceed, demanding to be treated as if I were a peasant. It is a brave statement, but a peasant would have passed out by now. Felix inserts the royal bistoury, the custom knife, and slices through the fistula. The pain must be blinding. A searing, tearing fire in the most sensitive nerve cluster of the body. You imagine the king's knuckles turning white, his jaw clamped shut to keep from screaming, a bead of sweat running down his nose to drop onto the surgeon's hand. The silence of the king is his greatest victory. To cry out would be human. To remain silent is divine. The operation is a success. The king lives. And then the true madness of Versailles begins. Sycophancy is a disease more contagious than the plague. As news of the king's surgery spreads, the courtiers do not just offer prayers of thanksgiving. They offer their own bodies. Suddenly, having an anal fistula is fashionable. You watch in disbelief as healthy dukes and counts approach the surgeons, claiming to feel a twinge in their posteriors, begging to be operated on. They want to wear the bandage of the king. They want to walk with the royal limp. It is a mass hysteria of emulation. You hear men boasting about their upcoming surgeries as if they are discussing a new wig. "I am to be cut on Tuesday," one says proudly. "Ah, Monsieur Felix is doing mine on Friday," another replies with a sneer of superiority. They are paying to be mutilated, to suffer the same agony as their idol, in the hopes that sharing his pain will somehow let them share his glory. You check your own body frantically. A simple itch becomes a source of panic. You do not want the surgery. You do not want the fashion. You just want to survive. But in this world, health is suspicious. To be hale and hearty when the king is suffering is seen as a lack of empathy. You learn to feign a slight limp, a grimace of discomfort, just to blend in. You pretend to be breaking down, because perfection is an insult to the wounded crown. The recovery is slow. The physicians continue their assault. They prescribe heavy wines, roasted meats, and more purges to build strength, exactly the diet that caused the problem in the first place. It is a cycle of abuse. You realize that the medical profession here is not about healing. It is about activity. They must be seen to be doing something, even if that something is draining the blood from a man who is already pale as a sheet. The smell of the sick room wafts into the hallway. It is the smell of old blood, cauterized flesh, and the sharp medicinal tongue of vinegar used to clean the instruments. It mixes with the ever-present stench of the latrines, creating a heavy, morbid atmosphere. You feel trapped in a hospital run by madmen. One evening, you see a physician passing by, wiping a lancet on a velvet cloth. He looks tired but arrogant. He holds the power of life and death, and he knows it. He catches your eye. "You look flushed, monsieur," he says softly. Perhaps the blood is too hot? A small bleeding might clear the head. You freeze. Your heart hammers against your ribs. "I am quite well, doctor." You lie, your voice steady despite the fear. Merely the heat of the fire. The transition is abrupt, almost violent. One moment, the grand apartments are blazing with the light of 1,000 wax candles, their flames multiplied by the mirrors until the room feels like the inside of a diamond. The next, the king is retired. The heavy doors to his bedchamber have thudded shut, and the palace undergoes a sudden, brutal economy. Versailles does not sleep, but it does go blind. The order is given to extinguish the lights, not to save wax, though the cost is astronomical, but because the show is over. Without the sun, there is no need for light. You are left standing in the aide-de-boeuf antechamber, the sudden gloom pressing against your eyes. You need to get back to your cramped quarters in the attic, a journey that in daylight is a simple matter of walking. Now, however, it is an expedition into a hostile wilderness. You wait for your eyes to adjust, but the darkness here is heavy. It is a physical weight, compounded by the velvet drapes that blot out the moon and the smoke from the just extinguished wicks that hangs in the air like a gray curtain. You might expect the hallways to remain lit for safety, or at least for dignity, but candles are currency. The moment the king is gone, the servants descend like locusts. The stumps of wax candles, the bouts de bougie, are a perk of the job, a valuable commodity to be sold on the black market or used in their own dark corners. Within minutes, the sconces are stripped bare. The palace of the Sun King is plunged into a darkness so complete it feels medieval. You are left with nothing but the faint, dying glow of the embers in a distant fireplace and your own memory of the floor plan. You take your first tentative step. The floor, which gleamed with such polish under the chandeliers, reveals its true nature in the dark. It is treacherous. During the day, you can see the patches of spilled wine, the grease dropped from plates, and the puddles left by the spaniels. Now, every step is a gamble. You adopt the Versailles shuffle, a sliding, testing motion, keeping your weight on your back foot until you are sure the ground ahead is not slick with something foul. It makes you look like a nervous skater, but dignity is the first casualty of the night. The silence is deceptive. The palace is full of noises that the bustle of the day obscured. You hear the scuttling of claws on parquet. Rats are reclaiming the territory. You hear the heavy, wet snoring of a Swiss guard asleep on a bench. And you hear the distinct, rhythmic dripping of something, somewhere, hitting the floor. You pray it is water. You know it probably isn't. Navigation is complicated by the architecture. Because there are no corridors, only rooms opening into rooms, you must pass through the sleeping quarters of others to reach the stairs. You open a door slowly, trying to hush the squeak of the hinge. The room is pitch black. You can hear breathing. Someone is sleeping here, perhaps a courtier who could find a bed and curled up on a billiard table, or a servant on a pallet. You step gingerly, arms extended like a sleepwalker. Your shin connects with the sharp, gilded corner of a commode. The pain is blinding, but you bite your lip. To cry out is to wake the sleeper, and in the dark, a startled nobleman with a sword is a dangerous thing. As you limp forward, your boot finds a patch of texture that is wrong. It is soft. It yields. And then it squelches. You freeze. The sensation is unmistakable. You have stepped in the leavings of the day. Was it a dog? A drunken marquis? A bucket that was kicked over and ignored? It doesn't matter. The result is the same. You are now tethered to the floor by a sticky, foul anchor. You scrape your boot against the leg of a chair, a petty act of vandalism that brings a grim satisfaction. You realize that the palace at night is a minefield of biological hazards. The cleaning staff, if you can call them, that will not arrive until dawn. For the next 6 hours, every accident, every spill, and every bodily function performed in these halls is a trap waiting for an ankle. Historians still argue about the exact number of accidents that occurred in these dark migrations, broken legs, concussions, falls down the marble stairs. The records are sparse, perhaps because falling down a flight of stairs into a pile of refuse is not the sort of glorious death one records in a memoir. But as you reach the grand staircase, you understand the danger. The marble steps are wide, smooth, and utterly invisible. There is no handrail in the center, only the abyss. You hug the wall, your fingers tracing the cold stone, feeling for the edge of each step. Halfway down, you hear a sound that freezes your blood. A low growl. The king's dogs are allowed to roam freely, but there are other dogs here, too, strays that slip in from the stables or the hunting hounds that have wandered up from the kennels. In the dark, a mastiff is a monster. You stand perfectly still, listening to the clicking of nails on the stone. A sound passes you, fading into the gloom. You exhale, the breath trembling in your chest. You are the intruder here. The night belongs to the animals. The smell in the dark seems amplified. Without visual stimuli, your nose goes into overdrive. The stale smoke, the cold grease, the underlying sewage, it all merges into a suffocating blanket. You feel as though you are wading through the scent. It clings to your clothes, your hair. You wonder if you will ever feel clean again. There is a specific odor near the bottom of the stairs, a sharp, acidic tang of vomit. Someone had too much of the king's bad wine. You skirt wide around the area, guided only by the reek. You finally reach the narrower, wooden stairs that lead to the attic corridors. These are even more treacherous. They are steep, creaky, and narrow. The air here is hotter, rising from the floors below, carrying the dust of the day. You are climbing into the chimney of the palace. The wood is worn smooth by the thousands of servants who run these steps daily. It is slick with a century of grease. You slip, your hand flattening out to catch the wall. Your palm meets something wet and slimy on the plaster. You pull it back with a shudder, wiping it frantically on your coat. You don't want to know what it was. You decide it was just condensation. You are almost certainly lying to yourself. When you finally reach your door, you fumble for the key. The metal is cold, a stark contrast to the humid, organic warmth of the hallway. You slip inside and slam the bolt home. You are safe. You lean against the wood, heart pounding, listening to the silence of the corridor outside. But then you look down. Even in the dim light of the moon filtering through your tiny garret window, you can see the dark stain on your shoe. You have brought the palace in with you. You sit on the edge of your narrow bed, unbuckling the shoe with trembling hands. You realize that the darkness of Versailles is not just an absence of light, it is a presence of filth. It conceals the true cost of this golden life. The king may be the sun, but when he sets, the world belongs to the mud. You toss the shoe into the corner, resolving to let your valet deal with it in the morning, if the rats don't carry it away first. You lie back, still dressed, and listen to the scuffling in the walls, waiting for the sun to rise and bleach the horror back into beauty. You are awake before the sun, jolted from your fitful sleep by a sound that is not the fanfare of trumpets, but the rhythmic, wet slapping of heavy cloth against stone. You rub the grit from your eyes and step out into the hallway, wrapping your banyan tight against the morning chill. The gallery, usually a rite of silk and arrogance, is empty of courtiers. Instead, it is occupied by the ghosts of Versailles. You are witnessing the daily invasion of the invisible army, the legion of souls whose sole purpose is to reset the stage before the actors arrive. These are not the liveried footmen who stand like statues in the king's antechamber. These are the garçons du château, the scrubbers, the carriers, the human mechanisms of sanitation. They move with a frantic, terrified efficiency, knowing that they must erase the evidence of 6,000 people as biological functions before the first duke wakes up to demand his chocolate. You watch a pair of men wrestling with a large wooden tub. It is sloshing dangerously. This is the harvest of the hallway buckets, the night soil collected from the corners, the alcoves, and the overflow valves of the palace. The smell is raw and unmasked by perfume. It is the concentrated essence of the court, stripped of all its pretensions. The men do not wrinkle their noses. They lost the ability to smell this years ago. Their faces are masks of exhaustion, gray-skinned and hollow-eyed, looking less like living men and more like animated clay. They carry the weight of the nobility's excess in the most literal sense. You notice the strain in their forearms, the way the heavy tub digs into their calloused fingers. If they drop it, they are not just fired. They are likely beaten or imprisoned. To spill the filth of a marquis onto the floor of the king is a crime against the state. So they move with the grace of tightrope walkers, balancing the unmentionable burden of their betters. Further down the hall, you see the frotteurs, the floor polishers. Their job is a strange, athletic dance. They strap heavy brushes to their feet and skate across the parquet, back and forth, hour after hour. There is no wax stripper, no machine buffer. There is only the friction of human muscle against oak. They must grind away the mud, the wine stains, and the invisible layers of grime tracked in by thousands of shoes. You watch one young man slide past, his legs pumping in a rhythmic, mesmerizing motion. He is sweating profusely, his sweat dripping onto the floor he is trying to clean. only to be buffed into the wood a moment later. It is a futile cycle. He is literally polishing the floor with his own body fluids. Historians still argue about the mortality rate of these workers, whose hearts often gave out from the sheer cardiovascular strain of skating the miles of palace corridors every morning. You suspect the number is high, but in Versailles, a broken servant is easily replaced. They are cheaper than the beeswax they use. You step back into the shadows as a woman passes, carrying a bundle of linens. These are the sheets from the lesser guest rooms. They are stiff with sweat and worse. She holds them away from her body, but the dampness seeps through her apron. She is heading to the laundry, which is not a place of warm water and soap, but a cold, brutal purgatory. The laundry of Versailles is often washed in the reservoirs or the river, pounded with stones and abrasive ash. The lye used to bleach the king's shirts. White eats the skin off the washerwomen's hands. You have seen their hands before red, cracked, bleeding, looking like raw meat. They destroy their own skin to ensure yours feels soft. There is a hierarchy even here in the muck. The men who empty the king's personal chaise percy are the aristocracy of the waste management world. They handle the royal offering. They are allowed to use the back stairs. The men you see now, struggling with the communal buckets, are the untouchables. They deal with the anonymous waste of the masses. It is a thankless task. They are the kidneys of the palace, filtering out the toxins so the body politic doesn't die of sepsis. You notice something unsettling about their clothes. They are wearing the cast-offs of the cast-offs. A coat that might have belonged to a merchant 10 years ago, now stained and tailored with a knife. But the hems are wet, always wet. They spend their lives wading in the fluids that the nobility discards. They are absorbing the court into their pores. A supervisor barks a quiet order, and the pace quickens. The sun is threatening the horizon. The Grande Ecurie, the great stable, is waking up, and soon the courtiers will emerge. The transformation must be complete. The stain on the carpet must be hidden. The smell must be fumigated with burning herbs. The buckets must be vanished. It is a magic trick. The nobility wakes up to a pristine world, believing that their filth simply evaporates into the ether. They never see the men with the gray faces and the wet hems. You find yourself staring at the hands of a man scrubbing the baseboard. He is using a rag that looks dirtier than the wall. He scrubs with a mechanical, jerky rhythm. His knuckles are swollen, likely arthritic from the damp and the cold. He pauses for a second to cough, a deep, hacking sound that rattles his thin frame, then immediately resumes scrubbing. He knows he is replaceable. There is a line of starving peasants at the gates of Versailles every morning, begging for the chance to carry the buckets. It's steady work, after all. The supply of waste is the only thing in France that is recession-proof. The carts, the tombereaux wait in the courtyards to take the waste away. They will trundle out through the town, leaking a trail of foul liquid, heading for the dumping grounds in the marshes. The townspeople of Versailles hate them. They complain of the smell, of the sickness that follows the carts. But the palace must be purged. The luxury of the Hall of Mirrors is purchased at the cost of the health of the surrounding countryside. You realize, with a sudden sharp clarity, that you are a parasite. You, the Duke, the King, you are all living on the backs of these people. You eat the food they carry, you sleep in the beds they make, and you relieve yourself in the buckets they empty. They are the biological support system for your ego. The worker looks up. For a split second, your eyes meet. You expect anger or perhaps envy, but there is nothing. His eyes are flat, dead, opaque. He looks at you not as a person, but as a source of work. You are just another generator of mess. He looks back down at the floor and scrubs harder. The indifference is more chilling than hatred. He has accepted his role in the machine. He is the filter. You are the effluent. You retreat back into your room, closing the door softly. You feel a sudden urge to wash your hands, but the water in your basin is stale. You sit on the edge of the bed, listening to the fading sounds of the scrubbers. Swish, slap. Swish, slap. It is the heartbeat of the palace. Later, when you walk down that hallway in your silk stockings, gliding toward the king's mass, the floor will be... The sun is high now, baking the stone walls and heating the crowded galleries. And the atmosphere in the palace has thickened into something that feels less like air and more like a heavy, invisible syrup. You take a breath, but instead of oxygen, you inhale a dense, cloying fog that tastes of flowers, spices, and something darker, something feral. You have entered the war zone of olfaction. In Versailles, the battle against the stench of the latrine is fought not with bleach or plumbing, but with the most aggressive, expensive, and nauseating perfumes known to man. You are drowning in scent. It is not the delicate spritz of a modern fragrance. It is a heavy bombardment. The logic of the court is simple. If the air smells like death, you must strangle it with the smell of life. But the weapons of choice are strange. The most popular scents, musk, civet, and ambergris, are not floral. They are animalistic. Consider the irony. To hide the smell of human biological functions, the court douses itself in the glandular secretions of animals. You watch a fashionable marquis pull a small jeweled bottle from his pocket. He is applying civet. It is a paste harvested from the anal glands of the civet cat. In its raw state, it smells of fecal matter. Diluted, it becomes a heavy, musky, sweet scent that hangs in the air like a physical presence. He dabs it on his neck, his wrists, and even his mustache. He is effectively smearing himself with cat extract to prove he is civilized. Then there is musk, harvested from the glandular pods of the musk deer. It is earthy, woody, and incredibly potent. A single grain can scent a room for decades. And ambergris, the gray amber, which is nothing less than the aged vomit of a sperm whale found floating in the ocean. It is worth more than gold. It fixes the scent, making it last forever. These are the smells of the aristocracy: anal glands, deer pods, and whale vomit. They are heavy, oily, and tenacious. When these heavy animal notes mix with the underlying odors of the palace, the sweat, the unwashed bodies, the overflowing buckets, the rotting food, they do not neutralize the stench. They complicate it. They create a new, terrifying accord. It is a sweet, rotting smell, like a funeral parlor, where the flowers are trying desperately to cover the scent of the corpse. It is cloying. It sticks to the back of your throat. You feel coated in it. The application is total. It is not enough to perfume the skin. Everything must smell. You are wearing perfumed gloves, leather that has been soaked in oils and spices to hide the smell of the tanning agents, which, historically, involved urine. You fan yourself with a scented fan. The furniture is rubbed with beeswax and oils. The king's shirts are boiled in water, infused with lavender and cloves. Even the fountains in the gardens are sometimes scented on special occasions. There is no neutral surface. This olfactory assault is driven by fear as much as vanity. The medical theory of miasma still holds sway. Bad air causes disease. Good smells strong, pungent smells are believed to purify the air, acting as a shield against the plague. So, when a duchess drenches herself in tuberose and jasmine, she is not just trying to be seductive. She is wearing a gas mask. She believes that the invisible wall of scent will protect her from the lethal vapors rising from the courtyard. But the cure is often worse than the disease. The sheer intensity of the perfumes triggers physical reactions. The king himself, once a lover of heavy scents, has developed a sensitivity in his old age. The heavy musk gives him blinding migraines. He now forbids the strongest perfumes in his presence, tolerating only the lighter scent of orange blossom. But the courtiers, desperate to cover their own tracks, often ignore the rule or simply layer the orange blossom over the musk, creating a dissonant, headache-inducing clash. You feel the throb in your own temples beginning. The air is too rich. It lacks the clean, sharp neutrality of fresh wind. It is like breathing soup. You find yourself longing for the smell of rain or wood smoke, or even the honest stink of a horse, anything that smells of just one thing. Here, every breath is a complex cocktail of 20 different ingredients, all fighting for dominance. You pass a group of courtiers near the Hall of Mirrors. The heat radiating from their bodies intensifies their perfumes. It is a visible haze. You can almost see the waves of scent rolling off them. One lady is wearing a pomander, a ball of gold filigree filled with solid perfume on a chain around her waist. It swings back and forth, wafting clouds of clove and cinnamon. Another man has a sachet of dried herbs sewn into the lining of his coat. They are walking diffusers. But beneath the heavy floral top notes, the base notes of reality persist. You catch a whiff of the latrine near the staircase, then a blast of rosewater, then the sour tang of old sweat, followed immediately by the sweetness of iris root. It is a sensory roller coaster. Your brain tries to separate the smells, but it fails. It registers only a chaotic, nauseating whole. It is the smell of luxury rotting from the inside out. The taste of food is compromised. You try to eat a sweetmeat, but the scent of the lady next to you is so strong that the marzipan tastes like lavender and civet. You are eating her perfume. The water in your glass absorbs the odors of the room. You are consuming the atmosphere. There is no separation between the outside world and your internal organs. You realize that the perfume serves another, darker purpose. It acts as a social barrier. The stronger your scent, the more space you command. A powerful perfume forces people to step back, to give you room. It is an invisible force field. The poor smell of sweat and dirt. The rich smell of civet and ambergris. The middle class smells of nothing. In Versailles, to smell like nothing is to be nothing. You must choose your odor to define your rank. As the afternoon wears on, the scents begin to turn. The floral oils oxidize in the heat. The animal musks become rank. The perfumed fog turns stale. It begins to smell like the inside of an old trunk that hasn't been opened in 50 years, dusty, sweet, and suffocating. You feel a wave of nausea. It is a specific type of nausea, born of sensory overload. You want to scrub your skin, to peel off the layers of scent that have settled on you, but you can't. You are marinated in it. You look at the beautiful crystal bottles on the vanity of a passing lady's maid. They glitter in the light, filled with golden liquids. They look like potions of eternal youth. But you know the truth. They are just liquid masks. They are the desperate attempt of a society to deny its own biology. They are trying to smell like flowers and whales, so they don't have to admit that they smell like people. You press a handkerchief to your nose, but it is useless. The candles are guttering low in your small room, casting long wavering shadows that dance against the peeling plaster. The day is finally dead. The king is asleep. The courtiers have retreated to their various corners of the hive, and the relentless, crushing noise of the palace has subsided into the heavy silence of the night. You are sitting on the edge of your bed, staring up at the ceiling. In the dim light, the gold leaf on the cornice looks less like a symbol of divine power and more like dead skin, flaking away to reveal the rot underneath. You are exhausted, a deep, marrow-level weariness that sleep will not cure. But as you sit there, listening to the settling of the massive stone beast around you, a terrifying clarity washes over you. It is the realization that this is not a temporary hardship. This is not a stepping stone. This is the destination. You have clawed your way to the center of the world, and you have found that the center is a sty. A beautiful, diamond-studded, gold-plated sty, but a sty nonetheless. You look at your hands. They are stained with the invisible residue of the day, the grease of the handshake, the dust of the carpet, the dampness of the air. You rub them together, but the friction brings no warmth. You realize that you have changed. When you first arrived, the smell of the hallways made you gag. Now you barely notice it unless the wind shifts. You have become acclimatized to the stench of decay. Your lungs have learned to filter the ammonia and the musk, accepting them as the natural atmosphere of power. This adaptation is the true trap. If you were still repulsed, you might leave. You might pack your trunk and flee back to your country estate, to the clean air and the quiet nights. But you won't. You can't. The poison has entered your blood. You have traded your freedom for proximity. You are addicted to the misery because the misery is shared by the king. To leave would be to admit that the dream is a lie, that the Sun King is just an old man with a fistula, and that Versailles is just a swamp with a very expensive lid on it. You stand up and walk to the small window. It is sealed shut, painted over years ago to prevent the drafts. You scratch at the glass with a fingernail, clearing a small circle in the grime. Outside, the gardens are swallowed by darkness. Somewhere out there, the fountains are still. The water in the basins is stagnant, breeding new life in the dark. The trees are silent witnesses to the secrets buried in their roots. You wonder how much of the garden is soil, and how much is other things. You turn back to the room. The luxury here is a thin veneer. The velvet of your chair is threadbare where the light hits it. The rug is worn. The mirror is clouded with age and mercury degradation. Everything is slowly dissolving. The palace is fighting a losing war against the marsh it sits upon. The damp rises up the walls, blistering the paint, warping the wood. You can hear it, if you listen closely, the slow, wet sound of the building digesting itself. You think of the thousands of people sleeping around you. They are all stacked in their boxes, dreaming of tomorrow's lever, tomorrow's glance from the king, tomorrow's chance to be relevant. They are all willing prisoners. You are all inmates in a golden asylum, where the inmates are also the guards. The locks are not on the doors. They are in your minds. The smell you carry now, that unique blend of sweat, perfume, dust, and waste, is your uniform. It marks you. If you were to walk into a village church tomorrow, the peasants would smell you coming. They would smell the court. They would envy you, not knowing that this scent is the smell of fear and confinement. You are a carrier of the Versailles plague, a contagion of vanity that rots the soul while polishing the surface. You lie down on the bed, not bothering to undress fully. The linens are cold and slightly damp. They always are. You pull the heavy quilt up to your chin. It smells of lavender and mold. You close your eyes, but the images of the day replay behind your eyelids. The grease on the king's chin, the louse crawling on the bishop's wig, the gray face of the man scrubbing the floor, the stain on your shoe. There is no exit. You understand that now. To leave is to die socially. To stay is to die slowly, physically, and spiritually. You have chosen the slow death. You have chosen to be a decorative object in a room that smells of a sewer. You have chosen the gilded sty. And as you drift toward a fitful, shallow sleep, you realize that the silence is not empty. It is heavy with the breathing of the house. The house is alive. It feeds on you. It feeds on your warmth, your ambition, your dignity. You are just a fuel source for the machine. The gold on the walls shines because it is polished by your eyes. The floors gleam because they are scrubbed by your fears. You take one last deep breath, inhaling the heavy, stagnant air of the attic. It tastes of history. It tastes of mistakes. It tastes of home. You stop fighting the nausea. You let it settle in your stomach, a cold, heavy ball of acceptance. You belong here now. You are part of the inventory. You are a courtier of Versailles, and you will never be clean again. Now the heavy gates of the palace are closed, and the history books are shut. The frantic, sweating, perfumed crowds have dissolved into the mist, leaving only the quiet hum of the night. You can step back now. You can let the image of the golden cage fade, leaving behind the damp stone and the heavy air. You are safe here, in your own time, in your own space. The air around you is clean. The shadows in your room are not hiding secrets or grime, but simply offering rest. There is no one watching you, no one judging your coat, no protocol to follow. You can just be. Feel the weight of the day lifting off your shoulders, just as the heavy velvet coat would slip from the courtier's back. Let the tension in your jaw release. There is no need to smile, no need to bow, no need to hold your breath. The noise of the court has been replaced by the steady rhythm of your own breathing. In and out, slow and steady. The past is a heavy burden to carry, but you don't have to carry it anymore tonight. It is done. The dust has settled. The candles are out. The darkness is not a threat. It is a blanket. Pull it around you. Let the silence wash away the echoes of the crowd. You are not in the swamp. You are warm. You are dry. You are free. Let the story drift away like smoke, rising up and disappearing into the quiet, starless night. Let your mind become still, a quiet pool of water, undisturbed and clear.